Hi, I'm Jeremy Zuki, one of the financial planners with Abundo Wealth. And as we like to do, we like to interview all of the other great financial planners that we have on topics of interest to them, where they're experts, so that we can talk about a lot of fun things ranging from investing to travel. And travel is what we're going to talk about today. So I have Andrew Dressel, one of the financial planners on our team. So, Andrew, maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me on today. And, I've been with Abundo a little over 3 years and been a financial planner for 10 years. And, we really love, my family loves traveling. And part of that is trying to take advantage of all the kind of different travel hacks that are out there to take advantage of that. And so I'm really happy to be here today and be able to share this with anyone watching.
That's awesome. And you're one of our go-to internal resources on the team for travel hacking. You have a wealth of knowledge on the subject. So I'm curious first how you got into travel hacking.
Yeah, I probably not too different than most people that are out there, right? You read some blogs, you kind of get an idea of it. And my first attempt at it did not go well. So
Mhm.
our family wanted to go on a trip to New Zealand, and I read all these things about how you can use points for these great international trips. And, got my Chase Sapphire preferred card and got my initial sign up points. And when it came time to like how do I use those points, I was lost in the weeds very quickly of all the options that are out there. And New Zealand, it's just a tough place also to use points to get to. And so I found myself over my head very quickly. And I think like most people kind of do in those situations, they just turn to, hey, I'm just going to book this through the portal and I'm going to get my 1.25 cents per point. And then I ran back to cashback and really said, I'm going to hone my skills on getting as much cash back because this travel world is so difficult. And fast forward probably 2 years after that, I met Eric, who's here at Abundo, and we were kind of comparing stats, and he said, "Wow, that's great. You're getting 3 cents back on your cash back, but I'm getting 18." And I just said that is impossible. And really that pushed me back into the world of travel hacking and really starting to learn not just, hey, there's this great ways to accumulate points, but actually how to use them properly. And really kind of took me down a whole different path, which I'm so grateful to be able to have been able to absorb that and use that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you tried to go for the gusto with New Zealand as your first trip. It's the pinnacle redemption there.
Right, right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't realize as I might have been, kicking my coverage a little bit on that first choice.
Well, cool. So, and the other really important thing that we wanted to get into today is that oftentimes you'll see this advice for individuals, for couples. Very rarely do you see this type of advice for families who are traveling with a lot of people at one time. So,
Yeah.
you and your wife have a bunch of kids, and so I think that makes you just a great person to talk through that evolution. So, if you could just talk about how that's changed for you, your travel hacking, as you've gone from using it for yourself to using it for a larger family.
Yeah, it's definitely changed our perspective, and it really, I think anytime that we're talking about travel, it's really making sure we have a kind of a clear understanding for our family. What's our budget, what's our objectives, and with travel hacking in the past, it was about getting the best redemptions, and now it's about the experiences and where we want to go. And the flexibility that came before when we were individuals and didn't have a family. Anyone with kids knows your schedule is not so much your own at that point in time. And so planning around school and, um, you know, daycare and all the different things that we have for activities, it adds some constraints to it, but still very manageable to still be able to travel with family and use points to get the most out of it.
That makes sense. And one of the things that I see a lot from people who are really seriously into this game is a huge just list of credit cards, just
Mhm.
applying for stuff nonstop to get sign up bonuses and maximize the spending. So let's
Yeah.
just say if you're a family, you're a little busier than that, you don't want to deal with 15 or 20 credit cards. How can you still earn a lot of points while keeping your life pretty and your wallet pretty simple?
Yeah, I mean, I really focus in on, what is our everyday expenses? Where are we spending our most dollars, right? A lot of that is, food, right? Our grocery bills and things like that are going to be more and but really looking at that budget and focusing on, okay, what's the most areas that you're spending and then what's the best points that I can accumulate for that fits our travel needs. and then really tying those together. So we don't have to think much about when we're, at the gas station or the grocery store, what's the best card to use. I try to keep it down to two or three cards that we're using primarily. I still label them for my wife if I change it out, so she
Mhm.
knows. Pull out my label maker. I'm one of those goofy people, but I know my wife doesn't want to be thinking about what's the best card. She just knows, hey, this one says restaurants. I'm going to use this at restaurants. But we try not to change it up too much to keep it simple. So that way, in your day to day, you're not always having to change things out.
Mhm. And I would say, in my experience, even though we don't have kids, we have a similar constraint just for
Mhm,
simplicity of wanting to maintain only 3 or 4 cards. And you
mhm,
start to notice some themes. There's
mhm,
there's groceries, there's dining, there's travel. There's not really that many cards that are earning huge points on a lot of different categories. So it seems like
mhm,
as long as you've got groceries and dining covered, travel covered, and then an
mhm.
everyday spender, that seems
Yep.
to be 90% of the way there. Is that a fair assessment?
100%. That's gonna be your kind of key go-tos. There are some different cards that are out there that are, if you have a big expense that doesn't fit in those categories, where, you can kind of choose the category that you have your most spending on that can kind of fill in there is still good, but that's exactly how we schedule it out. We'll still drip in a sign-up bonus here and there, as a big expense comes up. Kids love to inundate you with new opportunities of spending that you might not have foreseen. So, kind of keeping that at the ready. So as you have expenses come up, you can jump on that, but try to keep it simple as much as possible.
That makes sense. And so that's the earning side of the equation. Keep it
Mhm.
simple, earn on the big categories. But then when it comes to redeeming, I think that's another part where families might
Yeah.
be in a bit of a different situation. The classic
Mhm.
redemption that makes its way around social media is, I spent 100,000 points to sit in business or first class. But even if that happens to be a great deal, if you've got a family of five, that's 500,000 points you're burning through,
Right.
right? That may not be the most practical use case. So if
Yeah.
you're not as interested in those premium airline tickets, how do you go about it for more economy style options?
Yeah, and it really we had to kind of really come back to the what's our goal, right? As a
Mhm.
family when we're traveling, is it as we're having these, a more luxurious trip, or is it taking more smaller trips and hey, we're not getting as big of the redemption, but we're able to travel more with the family. And that was something that was really valuable to us was being able to get our kids experiences and be able to go new places and see different cultures and opportunities. And so even if we're not getting the best redemptions, we're really still searching out again, how do we use those points to get the most value? We don't want to leave that, just forsake that
Mhm.
to get the trip. But, we really did shift kind of away from those business classes and, said, okay, hey, if we can get a flight where we're getting, 1.82 cents per point on the flight, that's still doing really good. And we probably do book less flights with points, just outright and have really shifted that more towards hotels for our family specifically. That might not be the same for everybody, but and we've shifted our carriers too, right? We do a lot
Mhm.
more flights with like Southwest and some more of the discount flyers where, we can still travel at a lower cost for the flight piece of it. And we still try to sign up for those companion passes because that takes a one cost of the flight off. So for the flight portion of it, we're still using points when it makes sense, but we're targeting that more for the that's gonna be our cash portion that we're paying for our flights and using our points elsewhere where we can get a little bit more bang for our buck.
That's great. And we'll get to hotels in a little bit, but since you brought up the
Mhm,
companion pass, maybe if you could just
mhm.
explain a little more about what that is and the benefits of it.
Yeah, Southwest specifically, when I'm talking about that companion pass, has the option for you can earn status by spending a certain amount, but they do probably once, maybe even twice a year, a sign up bonus for one of their credit cards where you can have anyone fly with you that flies for free as long as you're flying. And you do
Mhm.
have the option to be able to change that person as well, if need be. It's somewhat restricted, but for us it'd be typically myself or my wife. So if we go on a couples trip, we can still do that flight option, but in our case we have four people right now. So that takes off
Mhm.
one-fourth of the flight cost by having that companion pass.
It's a really good deal, especially for people who like to do a lot of domestic
Mhm.
travel.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
to add to that, and I think that's a big thing that we did change for us as a family. We tend to do more domestic flights or domestic trips than we have with the international, just because we want the quantity still to be there
Mhm.
versus taking bigger legs. So Southwest is a great fit for us, but if you're doing more international, there might be a better solution that's out there too.
Totally makes sense. Cool. And then, size of family is another thing that I just wanted to briefly touch on. And
Mhm.
we've been talking about traveling with kids, but it might be different if you're talking about bringing one child
Mhm.
with you as opposed to a larger family. So, how
Mhm.
do you think about the difference in potential approaches there?
That's a great question. So depending on the size of the family and, what your objectives are, it could still very much make sense to be able to use points, or depending on the age of the kids as they get older. Some of those business class opportunities, international, very much could
Mhm.
still be a great option for the family. And if you do accumulate a lot of points, those can still be great, but it really depends on your objectives. So whether it's one kid or four kids, it just becomes a little bit more of how much do you need in points to accomplish it, and based off their age, what class and choices you're going to make there.
Yeah. And as a practical matter, I mean, I haven't searched it a lot, but I notice as you add more and more people to the search, you just get
Mhm.
fewer and fewer even available options. It can be very hard to find four
Mhm.
or five business class tickets, right? So the choice may be made for you in that respect.
Yes. Yes. The hard thing when it comes to, travel hacking in general is the amount of flexibility you need. And as I
Mhm.
mentioned with kids and schedules, that flexibility really does get constrained down, and sometimes with the flight options, they're just not there even if you did want to do it. And that's a really great point, that you might have to be really searching pretty far out and finding those great redemptions that are way in the distance, and being really flexible too. If you have activities that come up during that time, you're just going to have to say no. So that's always a balance you'll have to go with as well.
And so, not talking about the flight itself anymore, but another little perk that people enjoy with credit cards is airline lounges, being able to use those.
Yeah.
Especially nice for a family if you can get into one and not have to sit out in the lobby for too long. But some
Yeah.
credit cards now have gotten a little bit more restrictive. Like the American Express Platinum card, it's harder to bring a
Yeah.
guest without having to pay a large fee. So,
Yeah.
just talk a little bit about how to access that nice perk with some options that may be a little more family friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've taken advantage of the lounges at every airport that we can. It's great for families. Some, depending on the lounge that you're going into, sometimes you get a little not as excited about having younger kids inside there. I've been really blessed in the fact that my kids are very respectful and, have a lot of composure in those situations. So I'm very happy for that. But, hands down, the ability to be able to go in, have a place that's much quieter, less busy for kids. And a lot of lounges even have a like family area that's separate. Typically even a TV, like Centurion lounges are great for that. That you can go in, kind of still have that peace and quiet. You can contain your noise if you are a little bit louder family, but it gives the kids a place to be able to move and relax, in between flights. The changes though on a lot of lounges, they've been adding more and more fees to add family members, and we're always looking at it depending on how long our turnover is, or stop at the airport, whether it makes sense to pay those fees. And that has really changed that strategy somewhat, whether it's sometimes going and grabbing a muffin or two to kind of grab and go, or if it's we're going to be there a longer time, paying that fee to be able to go sit down, have that time as a family. So even with the new fee structure, I still sometimes think it makes sense, given the cost
Mhm.
of airport food and your travel itineraries, to have that time just to get outside the business of the airport.
That makes a lot of sense. A burger and fries per person, and you're looking at $20 a pop at some
Right.
of the
And
airport places
you got
anyway.
four
Yeah.
people. All right. That,
Yeah.
plus you can grab a drink or two while you're in there too. That doesn't always hurt either in that
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
cost,
No doubt about it.
on
Yeah.
the cost side of things. So
Yeah, cool. And you mentioned hotels, one of your
mhm,
your favorite new redemption
mhm.
strategies. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that because it's underrepresented, I think, in point redemption content. It's so heavily focused on that business class airfare. So, what's
Yeah.
great about using it for hotels? What are the opportunities people should be aware of?
Yeah. I would say on the hotel side, we've really focused on the Hyatt hotels.
Mhm.
Just for our family, the redemptions are really great there in a lot of locations that we love to go. So you were still getting closer to that 2 to 3 cent per point value, which
Mhm.
normally we'd be looking for in airfare, but we've been able to find that in hotels specifically. Um, as a family, we're spending most of our time, in those locations, and that can be one of the biggest costs, especially as the family grows and we have to have more rooms. that is something that being able to have a great redemption or kind of process to be able to pick those rooms up. Now, one thing to point out, as you mentioned with the flight opportunities and being able to
Mhm.
find one that fits that family size, hotels are a little bit easier, just given that they have a normal capacity and they typically have more rooms available to book via awards. And so it's not as constrained as far as the availability goes. And so a lot more flexibility, which is definitely needed on a family basis to find the right spots.
And you mentioned the Hyatt Hotel specifically, so that's
Mhm.
primarily going to be the Chase
Chase.
family of
Yep.
cards, right? That transfers
Yep.
over there.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So
Yeah.
yeah, primarily we'll use our Chase points and we do a lot of our accumulation on the Chase side, specifically for that option. And then any other credit card or points that we're accruing, we really try to focus those on the airfare opportunities when it makes sense. So
Mhm.
if we do have American Express or Capital One points, we're kind of splitting it in that two ways.
And on the credit card side, oftentimes at Abundo, we've recommended against
Mhm,
specific airline cards, except if
mhm,
you want one for the status perks or the baggage fees. But
mhm.
we generally say you want to accumulate transferable points, not points at the
Yeah.
individual airline. Is that a little bit different for hotels in your experience? Do you ever use the hotel's branded card?
Yeah, I do. And that's specifically, it's still primarily a secondary card. We're still going to use our transferable points just because it gives you more flexibility.
Mhm.
But having those even part of your wallet where you can, a lot of times help get higher status or a jump start on status or additional nights. There's some extra perks that come with that, especially if we are booking any nights without points, we're paying cash. You also accumulate a good amount of points with that as well. So still I would recommend going with a transferable points, as much as you can. But there are certain cases where if you're trying to build status and having that card as part of your wallet makes sense. Um, One of the things as on that hotel size, we've really focused on building up status with Hyatt as well, because there are, and this is across all hotels, different fees that come along, depending on the properties. And with families or with the kids, we definitely like the resort properties more to have the big
Mhm.
pools and things the family can do both on property and off property. And those resort fees can definitely add up as well. And we've really focused on becoming globalist members year in and year out, because those fees do get waived when you're booking an award stay as well. So amongst all the other perks, that's definitely another one that helps save money that we find a lot of value into.
Sounds very underrated. A 5 night stay, you could be saving a few $100 in
Oh,
resorts fee. Yeah.
easily, and it adds up quick.
Mhm. Cool. And then, all right, so that's hotels.
Mhm.
Are there times when it makes sense to not stay in hotels? So if you're thinking about just getting the most use out of your travel dollar for a family, when would you recommend somebody consider a non-hotel property?
Yeah, when you're doing an extended stay or, it's fair to consider, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, and more hotel companies are starting to branch into that as well. So hopefully we can bring some of the point redemption over to that side of the decision making as well. But, if you're needing multiple different rooms or you're not able to get an award stay, together, or you're having multiple families come together, um, that's a great opportunity to look at more of those vacation rentals. If you're, as a family, sometimes our decisions also is focused around how do we save money when we're on our trips as well. And that means, trying to eat in as much as we can, and having a full kitchen definitely is beneficial. And in certain cases, even when we had kids that were younger and, it was really important for us to be able to not just save on the cooking, but we have nap schedules that we have to be
Mm,
constrained to. And so we want to have that extra space where we can put them down for a nap, but we can still, go sit on the lanai or sit in the living room and still kind of continue our day to day, but have that extra space. And so that is where those really step in versus a hotel where you're all in one room and you're kind of limited on some of those decisions you would normally be able to do.
those are great considerations. It can be a little tricky sometimes when you think about the math, but there could be cases
Mhm,
where even if an Airbnb costs a little more out the door, your
mhm.
net total price could be lower because of the reasons that you were saying,
Yeah.
savings on food, and then
Mhm.
some of your own sanity on the trip to have nap time and all of that.
Yes.
Uh, Cool. And then, the biggest, I think, unloved part of a trip, the rental car is the next one that I
Mhm.
want to talk about with you. So
Yeah.
if you've got flights, people love to talk about that. Hotels sometimes get a little bit of press. The rental
Mhm.
car can now be a pretty big cost. They used to be cheap and now they can be
Yeah.
fairly expensive. So I'm curious to talk
Yeah.
about that kind of hidden gem of cost savings and how to have a good experience renting a car.
Yeah, definitely a hidden gem when it comes to, selecting a car. And, there's a lot of credit cards, especially ones that we recommend here at Abundo that come with some perks for different statuses with the car
Hmm.
rentals. So I would highly recommend anyone to confirm what benefits they get. And some of those, when you're traveling with a family, right? You aren't going to fit in your compact car.
Hmm.
You're going to need a little bit more space. And as much as no one loves to see the row of minivans laid out there. They're fantastic for travel. And so a lot of places those get skipped over and they end up in things like the President's Club row where you can pick any car that you want. And so even though if you're booking at a lower car, you can end up in a minivan that would normally cost you a higher cost on the selection. Again, that comes with the status if you have that. So making sure you've enrolled in those benefits is big. But and then using the best ways to book a car rental to save on the cost, and this is something that we've talked about multiple times here at Abundo, but I still think it's heavily underrated is the option to use auto slash in order to search for car rentals and be able to track your car rental. Those change multiple times per day, and being able to know that the price dropped on that. I think I've gotten 2 emails in the last day about a trip that we have coming up as a family that we've already
Hmm.
found lower cost bookings with those car rentals. So finding the lowest cost, being able to use those reward programs to book with there as well is big. One other thing I would say just on the car rental side is, we have young kids right now, that are still in the car seat phase, and we've done a lot of trips where we've brought car seats with, and there are some great options that are out there as well for travel harnesses and things like that that are still highway safety rated that kids can use that take up a lot less space than carrying car seats through or having to pay $50 a day for a car seat from a car rental location. They're great for, Ubers and Lyft rides as well. So that's a great option to consider to help save both on costs, but also give you a little bit more space when traveling.
And I think what's great about all these little ideas as you build them together is vacations are expensive. And so just accumulating all of these little savings, $50 here, $50 here, $100,
Yeah.
you could take a $3,000 trip and turn it into a $2,200 trip. That's a really
Mhm.
big deal.
Yeah.
Perhaps even much more so than the 18 cents per point that's great on the first class or business flight. It's real money
Right.
that you have for another purpose
Yep.
to use. So that's great. And Art, so we've talked about a lot of stuff today. Are there any other tips and tricks that you think families should be aware of when booking their travel?
Best tip and trick that I
Hmm.
would have, Jeremy, would be is really consider if you want to bring like an in-law with you on your trip, so you have someone that can watch the kids and have a little bit still time away, as a couple, because family trips really do start to transition more from less of a vacation to a family experience
Hmm.
and still being able to have some time as a couple to be able to get out and be able to go do things is so important. And so I think if you have the opportunity and you have someone that's able to come do that with you, not just a great way to be able to share that experience with family, but also be able to have some time for yourself. Um, I think one other thought that comes to my mind too, and I'll probably leave it at this for today, but is, being able to travel, again, setting out your goals. In some cases, it might be make more sense to not use points for the family, to still
Hmm.
really use, again, pay cash for hotels or air flights and things like that, and still save those points and take some time, as a couple and doing a couples trip where maybe you are able to use some of those bigger redemptions if you're really trying to get the most value out of it. It always just comes down to that balance of what your goals are again of traveling both as a family and as a couple and where you're going to get your most bang for your buck. And yeah.
It's a great summary. It just reminds me of financial planning in general. You start with your goals and then you figure out your resources to achieve
Mhm.
them. And hopefully in the meantime you develop good relationships with your in-laws so that you can bring them along to watch the kids.
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. This is great. A less often discussed topic with respect to travel and family. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.